Welcome to the Holistic Home Health Podcast. I'm Barry Mankin, and we're here with Mickey Shrader from EPS, or otherwise known as Environmental Protective Solutions. Welcome, Mickey, and thanks for being with us today. Probably the top remediator in town here in Nashville, Tennessee. Mickey's been in the business a long, long time, and if you could tell me about what you do and how you do it.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate the invite today.
Yeah.
So we've been in business about 15 years. We are a remediation specialist. We really focus on the mold issues. We also do some bacterial and viral work when necessary, but probably 90% of what we do is mold remediation. We're not a restoration contractor. We do not come in and handle fire losses or large water losses. We come in and fix the things that those issues create, which are large mold problems. So we work with a lot of restoration companies that don't have the capabilities for large-scale mold remediation. A lot of companies have the ability to do small-scale things, but once it gets to a certain level, then they're going to call someone like us in to work with them and rectify that situation.
Tell me, this is often misunderstood in our industry, the difference between restoration and remediation.
Restoration happens when you're at home, you have a water loss. Let's say a water line bursts and you've got water everywhere, wet floors, wet drywall, wet carpets. So usually that first call that's going to happen is to their insurance agent, who's going to either A, refer them to a preferred restoration vendor, or the homeowner actually has the choice to call any restoration company they want to use. It's their right to use whoever they want. So they're going to reach out to whichever restoration company they want. And then the restoration company is going to send a project manager in to assess the situation and see how large the loss is, how much equipment's needed. If the homeowner is happy with that restoration company, then they will start setting equipment to dry the water issues down and get the substrates, flooring, drywall, whatever, get it back to a dry standard as quick as possible.
Okay.
When you're dealing with mold, getting things dry quick puts you ahead of the curve of the mold growth. So that's the first step, is getting it dry. Many times, though, these things happen when people are gone. They're not home. They're on vacation or they're away for the weekend, and you don't get that opportunity to get it dry quick. And so when they show up 3 days later, now everything is sat soaking for the last 3 days. You have a really good chance of mold growth is going to start. That's
interesting that you say 3 days. That's kind of the line of demarcation between who you call right there. So there's so many instances I know that we've come in that they don't know how long it's been happening. They just discover it.
Correct.
And if it's been behind a wall or, through a ceiling or what have you, and they don't even realize they have a leak. It's easy when, something bursts.
Right.
Then it's like, oh my gosh, everybody's life stops. We have to hurry up, and then they don't know what to do. They start calling everybody. But by the time that process happens, even if they're on top of it, it's a day or day and a half. By the time they get some answers on what to do, now they're maybe 2 or only a day left, if they're lucky, to get somebody in there to start drying it appropriately.
I would still call the restoration company because they're going to have to be involved anyway, because usually there's going to be demolition involved, pulling up a flooring, cutting out of drywall, putting new flooring back down. Those are all things that restoration companies do. We, as a remediation specialist, we really do not do put back work. So I would still let the restoration company come in and scope it, get the equipment set. And then if they have a concern at that point, it would be, hey, we might want to bring the environmentalist in and let's do some checking. Let's do an assessment from the environmentalist perspective and see what he thinks. And then if it looks like it's possible, if enough time's passed and there is worry about it, if we have to look at opening wall cavities, we at least can do it under containment versus things we've seen in the past where companies just went in and started ripping and cutting and opening, and now they've exposed the whole area and cross-contaminated half the house.
How many times do you see that?
A lot. A lot. It's a very common thing. Restoration companies are built to go fast.
Right.
They move, and they're always trying to get this job set and move to the next job. So getting them to slow down and be a little bit more worried about mold issues can be challenging, particularly with the number of employees they have and how well they're trained. Some companies do a great job at training their employees. Others just kind of pitch them out there, and you could have a guy setting drying equipment that has no idea about the mold issue that could be happening or how to prevent any of it. And that's not his fault. It's a matter of training. It's a matter of knowledge. And unfortunately, the public has spent too much time on the Google doctor looking up information, and they have a lot of preconceived notions about what they found on Google about what this situation looks like or what it could be. And that then puts the client on edge, and the client can become really concerned and sometimes overly concerned. Sometimes not. It just depends on each situation. Every home is different. Every loss is different. There is no template for how every situation works.
Interesting. Yeah. So I know you and I have both seen situations where things have been done well and where things have not been done well.
Yeah.
So when we come in and with our company and we do the testing, I know that we've gone behind some that have not gone so well, and whether it was the insurance company using their preferred restoration company and there isn't containment, or they open things up and see visible, colonies of mold everywhere, they don't stop their process, or they don't even pause to get somebody like me
Correct.
in there to assess the situation, make sure that containment is set up correctly, and that they're setting their protocols for how do we remove this.
Right. Yeah. Because they're really concerned about drying. That's their thing, is they got to get it dry. But if they've also opened a wall and there's a colony in the wall and they have air movers in the space blowing, at that point they're now blowing that contamination all over the place, because those blowers move a lot of air.
So that's different rooms. That's all their stuff.
Yep.
Some of that stuff is expensive. That's their clothes, carpet, everything.
Yeah.
In their ductwork.
Absolutely. And that's why we really push hard to utilize the services of an environmentalist on these interior losses, because the environmentalist can set the baseline and say, okay, here's where we are. The testing shows we have this here, that over there. We know that area is clean, this area is not. Or it could be, hey, the next 3 rooms are now contaminated. So that water loss has gone from a water loss to a remedial job, that's made it bigger. And then it becomes an issue of, well, is the insurance going to pay for it? Yes or no? A lot of insurance companies don't really like paying for mold. Some do. Sometimes it depends on your policy. You can have a mold rider on your policy. Most don't, but there are cases where people have had those. So,
interesting, yeah.
Controlling the situation can keep a loss much more minimized if the people involved know what they're doing on the front end. And that plays to the restoration company, making sure they train their people and being able to recognize when they need to stop or when they need to call somebody else for extra expertise.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times, we've had those situations. We've both seen those situations. And there's a lot of cleanup on the back end. And then, somebody else has to get involved. I know you've gotten involved on the back end of some of those. We also know some good restoration people in the business as well, that understand the scope of that line and how to do things a little bit on both ends. But tell us about standards. Who sets those standards? I know the IRCRC.
Yeah. The IRCRC obviously is the standard that every restoration company and remediation company should really live by. And it outlines kind of step by step how you should handle these type of situations. Those are not always followed. And unfortunately, there is no governing body in the state of Tennessee that regulates or holds companies accountable for that. The state of Tennessee does not regulate mold remediation, period. It's generally regulated in coastal states, the Floridas, Texas. Any state that has hurricane issues is usually a regulated state because they have so much opportunity for water damage from hurricanes. but interior states generally don't regulate mold remediation companies. I wish they would. I would like to see it, because without some regulation at the contractor level of the contractors board, you have a lot of people who can just put a sticker on their door that says they do mold remediation, and they really have no background, they have no experience, and they just thought it'd be a great business to start and don't understand how this really works. So, for us, it's kind of a battle when you have some companies that may not even carry the right insurance coverages for what they do.
Right.
We have to carry a different type of insurance than a regular contractor does to protect us and the client. But so you never know without doing some research on who you're hiring. And you should really check out that person. And there's several things I think a customer should do when they're going to hire a contractor.
Yeah.
And this is whether it's a remediation contractor, a restoration a remodeler, if you're redoing your kitchen or your bathroom, I think these apply. And that is, you should always feel confident enough to ask the contractor for copies of his general liability insurance and a copy of his workman's comp insurance, because they will be working on your property. If they do not have the proper coverages and get hurt, it will wind up being the homeowner's problem.
Yeah.
Or if they mess something up terribly bad, if they don't have liability coverage, the homeowner has nowhere to go, for damages. So, anytime we work with another contractor, whether it's a builder or a restoration contractor, we have to submit copies of our insurance certificates to that company before we're allowed to step on the job site.
Correct.
And that's a requirement. That's how it should be. Homeowners can make the same ask.
Yeah.
And if that contractor can't produce them, or if he, kind of backs up a little bit and doesn't know really that's probably not the guy to hire, because he doesn't have the necessary things he needs to be in business.
Really good advice. Yeah. So, listen up, folks. That's how it should happen. Ultimately, the customer's in charge of their own place. And so if they don't do their own due diligence, they kind of get what they get, So, and this is, one of the reasons I think that we're doing this podcast is to educate people and to help and say, this is how things should be done. So, with you being at the forefront of this industry in Nashville and obviously, I would say being the top remediator in town, when people have integrity in their business and you operate, again, it's not just the what, it's the how. When you set those standards and have certain lines that you do from an integrity standpoint, you hold that standard high for everybody around you. Now, we're raising the other ships, right, in the industry. So hopefully a lot of people are listening that are even contractors, just to say, all right, let's do this better for the people, because obviously we want the home to be healthy. Let's talk about your process. How does that process work for a homeowner whenever they get to you?
Yeah, we take calls from homeowners, from real estate agents, from builders, from project managers. Those are the people that are calling us. If a homeowner contacts us, usually it's going to involve a conversation of what's the situation. How did you get to the point of calling us? What has happened? And the backstory helps me understand what we need to do to help them. We may not be the people they need at that moment, and in many cases, it needs to be the environmentalist that goes first. And we will, recommend that out and say, hey, you need to have this person come in and do an assessment, maybe some testing. The reason we recommend that is it's an independent third-party assessment. I tell folks all the time, they think they have a mold issue, they don't know, but they've been feeling bad or they're sick, or maybe a pest controller has said they had something going on in their house when they were there treating it, whatever. If the client called 3 or 4 different contractors to come look at this situation, the homeowner's going to get 3 or 4 different opinions and probably 3 or 4 different proposals on what to do. Which one is the homeowner supposed to choose?
Right.
They will not know. This is not their knowledge base. Mold issues like this are not in most people's wheelhouse.
Right.
So they're going to sit here and look at these 3 or 4 proposals, and unfortunately, most people are going to usually look at the dollars first. and go to what's it going to cost me. That's not always the best indicator that that person knows what they're doing or they're doing it right. Low buck Larry is not always the best guy.
Yeah.
So when we recommend out that you need to call an environmentalist, you're getting an independent third-party assessment from somebody who is there to work for the homeowner. They are not interested in getting a contracting job.
Right.
So the information that that inspector is gleaning from the assessment, the testing, the report that's written, all of that is done for the homeowner. At that point, we then tell the homeowner, you are more than welcome to send us that report, let us review it, and then we'll set up an appointment to come do an inspection. And if you want to do that with 3 or 4 contractors, that's great, but you send all of them the same report. That way, when you get your proposals back in, they're all on the same page. They are apples to apples proposals that are working based on the information that the inspector or environmentalist gave in the report. And that is just good consumer protection. That's how the homeowner knows they're getting the right things done. And that doesn't always happen. There are contractors in the market that do testing and contracting.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't believe in that. I don't feel that's good for the homeowner.
That's a definite conflict of interest.
It is a super conflict of interest. Most anyone who is in the industry understands how the testing works. And if you want to make that test look bad, you can. If you want to make it look good, you can. That's why you want the services of an independent third party. That way your data stream is accurate and you know it's good. You know there was nobody in the middle making it look good or bad.
Right.
Because if you want to make it look bad, a lot of contractors operate off the fear factor. In writing a proposal. They've got somebody they know is really, really scared. Well, that price can go up the more scared you are.
Yeah, exactly.
But, so, and that's not really the right way to do it, but it happens quite often.
After we set that process and say you've got an assessment from somebody like us and there's a report and you review that, sometimes as long as there's permission from that homeowner, we may have a discussion about, if you have questions on the report, as long as we have permission from that client, then you kind of know what you're getting into, other than having everything delineated there. And then, of course, part of that is us interpreting those lab results, based off of our assessment, kind of putting that package together. So when you're walking into something, whether something needs to be opened up or whether something really is surface issues, contents come into play with that. On previous podcasts we've had, we talk about the lungs of the home. All that's connected. All those pathways are connected to what you end up having to do, both from a containment standpoint or any other influence that may need some level of removal on a surface. So let's talk about what that looks like when you go into a structure.
Back up just a step. So we get the report in, we review it. Like you said, it gives us a good idea of what we're stepping into.
Yeah.
So we have an idea before we arrive there. Next we're going to set up that appointment with the client to come physically look at the structure with the reports in hand, with the data, with the lab test, and we're going to walk and photo identify everything. We document everything. We may need to be taking measurements of things. So that's the next step, is looking at the physical property, because that starts to pull the whole thing into focus of what we have to do. How many containments do we need to set up? How many negative air units are going to be involved? How many, laborers are going to be here on this job? Is this a small one-day job? Is it a week-long job? All of that physical inspection helps us decide what we need to do so we can put it on paper to present that proposal to the client. And in many cases, it may even require a conversation with the environmentalist. So here's what you wrote, here's what we see. We may need to have some back and forth to make sure we're on the same page of doing this the best way possible. And whether that's to make sure it's done as clean as possible or as efficient as possible, whatever the case may be, there's many times where you need to have that conversation. The report cannot just be the end of it. It's a two-way highway there for information flow. After that, if the client is then satisfied, with the proposal. We usually follow up with a phone call and make sure they understand everything. A big part of what we do is education with clients.
Right.
Clients have a lot of bad information that they pick up off Facebook groups or off Google, and they have certain preconceived notions about things that may or may not be true.
Everybody's experiences are their experiences, or
Exactly.
and it's not how it works.
And it's not how it works because every situation's different.
Correct.
You cannot paint this with a broad brush. So we do like to spend a lot of time talking with the homeowner about how the proposal's going to work, how the job's going to flow. Is it going to require them to be out of the home? If so, how many days? Many times they don't have to be out of the home. But if we're doing your entire kitchen and you don't have access to the kitchen, you're probably not going to want to be there because you can't get to your food and your cooking. If it's a spare bedroom upstairs, obviously that's not going to mean you have to be out of the home.
Right.
So it just depends on the job as to how that affects the homeowner. The more education that we can give the homeowner, the better they feel. And in many times they are really hyped up about the scenario. But as you educate them and talk to them and explain how we do it and what we're doing, you can see that tension level start to fall.
Yeah.
And they start feeling more comfortable that this is not, many times it's like, oh no, my house is destroyed. My house will never be the same. That's usually not the case. Mold issues in homes doesn't mean the home has a disease. It means there's a condition that allowed it to grow. If we clean it up and change the condition that allowed it, it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
So it's a fixable problem in most cases. There's a few outliers out there, which are very extreme scenarios where the house is just so bad you can't do anything with it. That's not the norm. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think.
Right.
And everyone thinks black mold is everywhere, and
is every mold,
and it's every mold, and it's on everything. If I had $1 for every time I've explained black mold to a client, I'd be retired. They think the little black stuff around the top of the caulk in the bathtub is black mold.
Right.
It probably is not.
Yeah.
I mean, can't know without testing it.
Right.
But black mold is one species only, called Stachybotrys, which you're very well aware of. But there's many other variants and species of molds that are black or dark in color, and they are not Stachybotrys.
And it's rare that it's just that. It's so many times, we talked on a previous podcast where, you've got waterborne molds coming in, and there's usually specific requirements for that to even, propagate. But once that's there, all the other ones want to play. They all come to the party. Yeah. And so there's so many other things there, and it's always type and concentration that we're dealing with. Real quickly, just to kind of do a quick process or rundown, just give me real quick the containment process, what that looks like, explain what negative air is, and obviously that's a lot to explain in a short amount of time, but just give me a quick rundown of what that looks like, and then what we would, in some cases, do testing on the back end.
Anytime we come into that scenario, we want to contain the area that gives us the most ability to work freely, but not take up too much space. So our guys will be entering with PPE, which is their personal protective equipment. We will then start setting up containment, which is usually going to be a 6 mil thick poly that runs from ceiling to floor. We have particular poles, zip poles, that we can use to create false walls around the work area. If it's around a window in the middle of a wall, we can bring walls off the exterior wall with our poles and create false containment areas so that when we're working inside that containment, everything stays inside the containment. So we're also going to set a negative air unit, which is just a very high-powered air filter, essentially. It's a 3-stage HEPA system that pulls air in, and it has a filtration ability down to 0.3 micron, which we know will catch mold spores. And then it's exhausting clean air. The perfect scenario is to do the exhaust through an exfiltration, which means we put a tube on it and run it out a window. We build a manifold, and that way we don't have a lot of fresh air coming in, but we're exhausting that air out, and it creates more negative pressure inside of that containment zone we have built. And that just, because when you start cutting drywall or you start sawing on it or whatever, any type of beating and banging on it is going to aerosolize anything that's on that substrate. Or when you pull insulation out of a wall cavity, if there's anything in that cavity, it just went poof
It's in the air.
into the air.
Yeah.
And that's the reason we contain it. And then the idea is the bulk of it's going to be pulled into that air scrubber and get exhausted out and trapped. So, for us, like at the end of a job, we're going to clean those scrubbers. When we get them back to the shop, they go through a cleanup. The filters are changed. They're wiped down with antimicrobials because you don't want to take anything from one job to the next. But let's say on our containment scenario, we had to take out some drywall, we cut out some insulation. The studs had some mold on it. We will HEPA vac that area really well. We'll apply an antimicrobial. On dimensional lumber, we generally like products that have hydrogen peroxide in them. The peroxides tend to boil really well. And the reason we want it to boil is mold will put a root into that piece of wood, just like a bush in the front yard. And we have to get that root out. A lot of people run to bleach, which bleach is always the wrong answer for mold issues. Bleach is a surface disinfectant. It's made for non-porous surfaces, not made for substrates like wood or drywall. So anyway, we use the peroxides. It boils it out. We'll vac it again. In many cases, we may need to scrub the surface, oftentimes with wire brushes. We're trying to break anything loose and get everything there off the surface and bring everything. So we may do that process multiple times of apply antimicrobial, scrub it, vac it, apply antimicrobial, just 2 or 3 times, as much as we feel like we need to do. And in many cases, the indicator is the peroxides. They will actually foam when they come in contact with mold. And once we get it to where it's not foaming anymore and it's running clean, that's an indicator to us that we're probably in good shape. So once we do that, we're then going to clean the rest of the inside of the containment with an antimicrobial wipe, including the containment. Everything, the plastic gets wiped, everything gets wiped. We're then going to walk away for about 48 hours minimum. 72 is perfect. And that's when the post-remedial verification, or PRV, is going to happen. And that's where the environmentalist comes back to check our work and do some surface swabs, some air testing, whatever test he wants to do will be run, and that will confirm whether we did our job correctly or not. And that's the insurance or that the homeowner gets that we did the right thing for them.
And so many insurance companies that I've dealt with don't understand that process.
No.
I mean, at all. To say, well, why do we even need to do that? Well, like, you're going to pay these people. Don't you want to make sure it's done? So, and it puts them on the hook too. So if it's not, and it just makes it a big mess.
Well, there's a lot of liability in what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with people's homes. We're dealing with their health, their children. This is where they live, sleep, breathe, eat. So, besides where they work, their home is the other place that they spend the most time in.
Should be a safe place.
Should be a safe place. Yeah. And the way to make sure it's safe is to have any work like that done tested by an independent third party. And that way the contractor, can be held responsible. And any remediator that tells you he's never failed a post-remedial verification is probably not telling you the truth. I mean, it happens. We have to always remember we're dealing with microscopic issues, things that we cannot see. When people see mold growing on a surface, they're seeing a colony that can hold billions of spores.
Yeah.
What they can't see are the single spores, like a 1 count of Chitomium or a 1 count of Stachybotrys. We don't know where it is. We just have to be detailed enough to clean it to get all of it. And there are times where you will not get all of it. And you could have reduced it significantly, but that verification is what tells you, hey, there's still a little bit left. That means we need to come back in and do the process again. And then follow up with another PRV. And that is what the homeowner allows them to sleep at night knowing that the work was correct.
Yeah, absolutely. That's at the end of the day, the standards don't call for killing it. They call for removal.
Correct.
And so that's so much of what we, I think, is misunderstood in the industry.
Yeah.
And when it says remove, it means remove. So get rid of it.
Yeah, remediation is actually the art of removal.
Right.
It's not the art of killing.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of sadistic.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be good. Real estate transactions.
Sure.
Same kind of process, what they should do.
Okay. So we do get a lot of real estate work coming in. Property put up for sale. Buyer sends the home inspector in. It's a lot of crawl space issues with home inspections.
Yeah, at least in this area. Yeah.
The bulk, I would say. But they do also find interior issues where there's been previous water leaks from a roof leak, things like that. Anyway, the home inspector comes in. He visually identifies something. Many times he will pin it with a moisture meter to see how wet it is. Is it an active leak issue or is it just a visible? In crawl spaces, it's usually a visible issue because you can really see the wood clearly. And in most cases, in Middle Tennessee, our environment's perfect for it.
Right.
Most homes here are built with a vented crawl space, which means during the summer, all that hot, humid air is being pulled through those vents into that crawl space. And summer after summer, that wood absorbs that moisture until it now has enough moisture content to support microbial growth.
Right.
Whether it's mold or fungus or whatever you want to call it, it has the ability to support it. Once it's growing on that wood, it then starts living on the moisture that's in the wood. So it's not going to go anywhere on its own. It just will not. Now, there's always probably going to be some mold in a crawl space somewhere. It's an open air environment because of the vents,
And
right?
mold's everywhere.
And mold's everywhere in the outdoor. Mother Nature grows it very well. What we're looking for, usually with crawl spaces particular, is the growth so prolific that it's damaging the wood because it will eventually extract all the moisture in the wood to where the wood is dry rotted on the inside and will start cracking under the weight of the house. And so you can have multiple joists crack, which means your floor is now sagging.
Becomes a structural issue.
It's a structural issue.
Yeah.
That's not to say that it cannot be a interior living issue or a health issue. It can, because 30 to 40 to 50%, depending on who you get it from, of the air in the crawl does make its way into the house over time. Many penetration points in the subfloor. And so if you have a lot of growth down there, it is always possible that some of that has made it upstairs through penetration, or if your ductwork has a leak in it, if it's got a hole in it, it can be pulled into the HVAC system and being pushed upstairs. So there's many ways this happens. A bulk of what we deal with the crawl space is going to be considered structural. And so the buyer wants this handled before they assume the ownership of this home. And normally we don't always push for environmentalist inspections on the front end of a crawl space because it's so visible. And speciation in a crawl space is usually not very important because the technique and the process is going to be the same no matter what the species is. And in Tennessee, it's probably going to be Aspergillus, Penicillium, Cladosporium. Those are our very common molds that usually show up first here. And so we know that. We usually don't find a lot of black mold, Stachybotrys, in crawl spaces. I'm not going to say it never happens. It's just not common.
Yeah, unless you have a lot of water over time.
It takes
or a good leak that's coming from
it takes certain conditions for Stachybotrys to show up.
Right.
So at that point, we're going to document that crawl space. We're going to photo identify everything. We're going to make sure everything was there. We then write the estimate. We send it over. Usually, it's to the realtor has contacted us, and then the realtor is going to discuss it with their client, which then they're going to discuss it with the other side, and they're going to decide who's going to pay for it, who's going to do the work. And
again, we're talking about removal. We're not even talking about prevention at this point.
Right. We're talking about removal. Basically, what we're talking about is what I call a basic remedial cleanup, which is taking the crawl space back to day one. It's resetting the clock to zero.
Right.
So the wood is clean. We clean it by hand. We can, if it's a dry mold, we can vac it. If it's a damp mold, we probably wind up scrubbing it out with wire brush or heavy abrasive pads. Applying again, hydrogen peroxide, heavy products, doing a secondary wipe after that, getting all the debris out of the crawl space. We take out the old vapor barrier because it's now considered contaminated. Everything that was on that wood fell onto the barrier. So we leave the crawl space super clean, and then the last step is we put in a new full coverage, basic contractor grade vapor barrier. And that's what the house probably had when it started. That's what code called for when it was built.
Yeah.
And that would be a basic real estate cleanup. Now, the question is, well, is it ever going to come back? Yeah, Probably.
Right.
Because if you don't change that condition,
Exactly.
it's going to come back. And that condition is all the hot, humid air coming in the vents. And so the answer to that, which is a conversation you have to have at some point, is encapsulation.
Right.
And that's where we actually seal the crawl space. We put in a different style barrier. Looks more like a pool liner has been put in. And that's to keep out all the moisture from the ground, moisture coming through the block walls. We seal the vents from the inside to stop that outside air, seal the penetration points in the subfloor.
Now, if it works like a pool liner, would you suggest as another amenity, especially in a real estate transaction, could they fill that up with water down there and use that as some sort of a recreation area?
They could. I don't recommend it. But
you don't recommend it?
No,
okay.
not really. And then the final step is we put in a permanent dehumidifier that controls the humidity rate. And really, we're basically creating about the same humidity rate that your home should have with your HVAC system,
Right.
which is around 50%. That's the kind of the number that keeps everything happy. It keeps people happy. It keeps wood happy. It's low enough to prevent mold growth. So that's the area. I always kind of tell clients 45 to 55 is the safe zone.
Yep.
We don't want to be above 60. We create this for a long-term average. We set this up so that over the time, it's controlled. If it were to rain real heavy for 3 days, the humidity may come up some, and it may jump up to 62 or 65 for a day, but the dehu's going to control it, pull it back down, and that's nothing to be concerned about. We're trying to make sure that it stays in that range for years.
I almost think we could have like a whole podcast session just on crawl spaces and all the options and how things happen. So maybe we should do that.
Pretty good idea. I mean, we hadn't got into water, groundwater.
None of that, drainage, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, HVAC.
And how air flows,
pressures.
pressurization, all that. So that would be a great podcast. Take that one down, Myra. All right. I think this has been a pretty full podcast, and we've just kind of scratched the surface of things here. So pretty cool. We're actually going to have a 2-part series here. So we're going to go in depth and do some case studies, talk about some case studies in our second part of our interview with Mickey. Again, Environmental Protective Solutions. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And hope you guys got a lot out of this. Thank you so much.